Hi, everybody. Today we are going to be installing Oracle database version 19C in a non-pluggable fashion. My name is Billy Effick. I'm a certified Oracle expert. I started working with Oracle in 9i up to 10G, 11G, and 12C, and now 19C. I have extensive experience both as a database administrator and a developer, and also dabbled into cloud infrastructure as an architect. Like I said, we are going to install and configure Oracle Database 19C in a non-pluggable way. This training is brought to you by PishonTech, Inc. We are an Atlanta, Georgia-based company. We do IT consulting, as well as training in the different database products like Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle Database, Oracle e-business suite, Oracle application, and many other platforms. Our intention is to produce a well-rounded IT professional in the different areas of training that we offer. And sometimes we will bring them into projects, real-life projects that give them a hand-on experience. To do this, we are going to configure, the sysadmin has given to us a virtual machine running Linux, Oracle Enterprise Linux, and we will ensure that we have a fully qualified domain name. We will ensure that the kernel parameters and packages are well set and that the appropriate groups and directories are created, and then that we configure inbound, outbound firewall traffic rules. And then we will install Oracle 19C in a non-container architecture. We will configure the networking components, TNSNAMES, SQLNET, and multiple listeners using NETCA, Network Configuration Assistant, and NETMGR. And we will create an OLTP database using DBCA, Database Configuration Assistant. All right, let's get into it. To do this, there's a little prerequisite that you would have attempted our LAB02B, install and configure Oracle 11G on Linux, or Oracle 12C or Oracle 19C on Linux, because this will require a little bit of Unix knowledge of Unix commands, which we believe you would have gathered in LAB02B. All right, we will be working with a virtual machine called my Unix server. My Unix server has about 4 gig of memory. You can give it more memory if you have a little more, but to be on the safe side, just leave it as 4. However, if your machine has a total of 4 gig, you know, you won't be able to power on this virtual machine. We are going to allocate 200 gig of hard drive. It's actually going to grow to that. The network adapter will be NAT, meaning that the VMware will be supplying the IP address. Although in this exercise, I will be leaving it as breached, but in your installation, it should be left as NAT. All right, let's take a look at the virtual machine. Let's go power up the virtual machine. So this virtual machine is running. VMware is powering the virtual machine. Here's the virtual machine. Like I said, in my case, it will be breached because I'm running it from a server. Some of you may be running it from a laptop. So you may want to make it NAT. So let me power on this server for the first time. Any of the green buttons will power it on. I copied it. This will cause VMware to reinitialize the IP address of this machine. While the machine is powering on, we are going to log in as the root user because we don't know the IP address of this machine and we don't know the domain name for this machine. So the lab says to log in as the root user. In a normal standard work environment, the sysadmins would have already done this. But for the purpose of this lab, we are going to log in as the root user and ensure that we have a fully qualified domain name. So for the first time, we will log in directly into the VM. It says the user is Oracle and MPT. So I'm going to select not listed, and then I'll select the type root user, and then supply the password for the root user, which will be provided during the training. All I need at this stage is to find out the IP address of this server. I will right-click on the screen, open terminal, right-click on the screen and open terminal, ifconfig, and if you scroll up, this is my IP address, 192.168.1.196. So I got that. That's my IP address right there. Now I will put this VMware server away and go back to my desktop. I'm going to log in as the root user using Secure Shell. So I'm powering Mobile XTEM up right now. Mobile XTEM is my SSH client. And SSH, the root user at 192.168.1.196. When I press enter, it's going to ask me for a password. And I'm going to supply the password that I supplied earlier. And it says, do you want to save this password? Yes, I want to save this password, so I don't have to provide it all that. So I am logged in as the root user. The first thing I want to do is I want to ensure that the IP address I have is the correct one in the host file. cat etc host. So you see my host file has this question mark right there. I need to fix that. I need to use vi etc host and edit the host file. Only the root user can edit the host file. Only the root user can edit the host file. So if you attempted to edit it with any other user, you will not be able to save it. So now I'm going to correct that IP address. I for insert, 1 arrow to the side. Of course, you know your mouse will not work with this VI. The domain name should be left as is, escape, right, quit. Now, I have changed the IP address in the host file. That doesn't mean that it has taken effect. So I need to restart the network. Service, network, restart. So I restart the network, and it's always better to exit and log back in. When I exit and I log back in, now if I check my host name, that's the correct host name. Check my IP address, ifconfig grep inet. So my IP address is 192.168.1.196. Now, if you follow the lab, it says to reboot the server and confirm host name and IP address. I wouldn't need to do that, but you can do that. But it's not really crucial. It says to define connection using mobile XTEM and secure CRT. I'm going to define a second connection as the Oracle user. SSH Oracle at 192.168.1.196. So the Oracle user, it should ask me for password, but if it asks you for password, you should have the password already. So anyway, I've logged in as the Oracle user. Now, all the root user does is to ensure that the server is properly named with a fully qualified domain name. And there's the name right there, fully qualified domain name. And we ensure that the right IP address is in the host file. Next, we are going to take a quick snapshot of our server. Before we begin, we're going to call the snapshot that name, begin_lab2b. So let's go to the virtual machine and go to VM right here. Take a snapshot. Take a snapshot and call it that name, begin_lab2b. Take a snapshot. The snapshot helps us to go back to this point, just in case we mess things up. Of course, in the real world, you will not have the ability to do snapshot, but this is a training environment. So it allows us to go back and forth and ensure we get it right. So the next question is, do we have the appropriate packages installed that will allow us to install Oracle 19C on this Unix server? This is kind of optional, but we can update the packages. We can update the packages, or I can check, do we have the package installed? Yum info, I need an information on this package. And it actually says that the package is installed, and that is the latest from the YUM repository, and this is Linux 7. So we don't need that YUM update. It's already installed. Available package is already installed. All right, but in the lab, you can install it with this command if you don't have it installed. All right, and then the beauty of this package is that this package will do a lot for us. When it is installed, it will deploy all the packages required for Oracle to be installed on this server. And then it will set all the kernel parameters of Linux, and then it will create the OS groups and the Oracle user that we will use to install Oracle. This is Oracle Corporation's way of reducing mistakes and sysadmin errors, eliminating configuration errors by the root user. Just by installing that package, all that will be automatically installed for us, right? So this command right here will install the package if you don't have it installed. That one will check whether it is installed or not. Let's go take a look and make sure that we have these groups. Let's take a look at the group Oracle. You don't have to clear your screen. I clear mine so that what I'm doing can be very visible to you. Groups Oracle. So I want to take a look at so the Oracle user is a member of O install, he's a member of DBA group, he's a member of all these other groups that are optional. But these two groups are not optional. You must have an Oracle user who is a member of these two groups. The rest are optional. All right, let's go and take a look at the Oracle user, the ID of the Oracle user. ID Oracle user. All right, so the Oracle user is a member of O install, is a member of DBA, and is a member of these other optional groups. We're just trying to look at our server. Now, these numbers may not match yours exactly. It doesn't matter. We're going to create a password for the Oracle user. We create a password and we're going to call it Oracle Pass1. Okay, the root user is creating a password for the Oracle user. And please, it's important that you stick to this password. I don't want you to call me and ask me for a password that you put that is not part of the class password. I might not know. It could be your wife's middle name. I don't know her name. Or your husband's middle name. All right. So there it is. I've changed the password. Of course, you know the password wasn't visible so that the people will not look over my shoulder and see the password. So now if I go to the Oracle tab and log out here and log back in, well, apparently I have done that change. Otherwise, it will ask me for the password again. All right. So now we got the password changed for the Oracle user. Now, I ask you to define a connection using MobileXterm and Secure CRT that are our FTP tools for this class. Now, if you're using any other tool, this is the same thing. It's just an FTP client, and it's just an SSH client. Some of you may be using POTI. So now I have logged in as Oracle and root here. Let me go to Secure CRT and do the same. I like to be very organized. I don't need to be using two tools, but because we are using these two tools in class, I want to be, demonstrating the use of both. All right, I'm going to create a new session. First of all, why don't I create a folder? I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this LAB02B, and I'm going to put a little underscore here, my Unix server. Right? So I created a folder right here, and now I'm going to create a session. The third little button there, it's going to be SSH2, and the IP address of the machine is 192.168.1.196. Of course, there are dots in between. This is the root user. Next, and I'm going to create a bookmark. My Unix server underscore root. Finish. Now, I like to have good fonts and all that. If I right click on it, go to properties, I can change the fonts. So first of all, let's change the appearance. Change the font to bold 15. Okay. Emulation will allow you to scroll through so many lines. If the emulation is 500, every time you scroll through something that is above 500, it will be lost in the browser, in the session. So I'm going to increase this to 5,000 so that I can go back more than 5,000 lines. Map keys. If you notice, sometimes when you log into SQL Plus and do a backspace, it gives you all kinds of gibberish. But if you come here and say backspace sends delete, that should deal with that. Say OK, and done. Now let's connect as the root user. Connect, and he's asking me for password. I want to save the password, and now it is connected. So I'm connected to that exact same server. Now let me create a second connection for the Oracle user. By the way, I went to the third button right here, I'm going to just copy this, copy that, and paste. Of course, it still has all the root information, so I'm going to edit that, properties, and I'm going to go to the connection name and change this to Oracle. You don't need to copy paste, you can do yours all over again, but I find copy paste very handy. SSH, the IP address is correct, and the user now is going to be Oracle. And when I say OK, so now I got two connections, Oracle and root. Now let's connect as the Oracle user. And now let me provide the password for Oracle, which was Oracle pass1. Now it is saved. So I have two tabs. And the beauty of this is that I can open multiple tabs. Look at this. Right click, clone session, and it opens multiple tabs. Right click the root user, clone session. It opens, so I can work in multiple tabs. All right, let's go back to the lab. So now we have created secure CRT and mobile STM connection to our database, to our server. We are still configuring the server. Now, we are going to create the directories that will be required to install Oracle. And because the first name of this directory starts with a slash, meaning it's from the root directory, only the root user can create this first directory. So we can actually create just this one, and then the Oracle user can take over and create the rest. But why don't we just create everything? So I'm going to copy this command right here. Be careful how you copy paste commands from this PDF, because sometimes it may leave out the dash over there. The -p simply means make all these directories in one move. Okay, I'm going to go here, paste that. I got the command intact. So I'm creating this will be my Oracle home and my Oracle base. That's done. If you have an error, it means it wasn't created. I'm going to change the owner of this directory. Right now, if we do an ls-ltr/, you will notice that U01 is owned by the root user. Of course, if it is owned by the root user, you will not be able to install Oracle. So we have to change the owner to Oracle. Change the owner -r means recursively, including the subfolders. So I'm changing the owner to Oracle. Now if I repeat that command again, now our U01 is now owned by Oracle, who is a member of OInstall. We are going to change the permission such that all the members of the OInstall group will have 7, and the owner, Oracle, will have 7, meaning full, read, write, execute. And then every other person will have read privilege. Okay, let's do that. After I've done that, we are going to do a comparison. You see that this guy has read, write, execute as the owner, but every member of the group has got a read permission, and the others have got a read and execute permission. Now let me do that query again so we can compare with what we have, /U01. So now with the permissions we granted members of OInstall full permission. Okay. Moving on. So we are still configuring the server as the root user. Right about now, the Oracle user now has all the permission to this directory. So now we are going to switch and log in as the Oracle user, and I'm going to pause the video at this point to allow you catch up a little bit, ensure that the server is properly configured and that your Oracle home has been created as the root user before we start preparing the environment variable. So, all right, next we are going to set up the Oracle environment variables. So this will be our host name right there, which conforms with the host name of the server. This will be our Oracle home, our Oracle base, our Oracle home, and then our Oracle seed. The unique name is not crucial at this point, but there is something called Oracle unique name. The best thing to do is to copy this entire setting, drop it in Notepad so that you are sure that things don't run here and there. Since we are copying it from a PDF file, I click, copy that. I'm going to put it in Notepad and be sure that everything is fine. Yep, I think it's looking good. I'm going to copy it from Notepad. And I'm going to go to the Oracle user, cat.bash_profile. So the .bash_profile is a hidden file that automatically runs and sets environment variable when you log on. So I'm going to do a vi The dot is part of the file name, .bash underscore profile. And then I'm going to I for insert, and then I'm going to paste all that environment variable right here. Okay, escape, save. Now, the fact that I updated my .bash underscore profile with all these environment variables doesn't mean that it has taken effect. As a matter of fact, if I check, you will see what will happen. Env grep Oracle. It says that there are no environment variables that has the word Oracle in it. So I have to log out and log back in. So I'm going to reconnect. Now, if I run that same command again to check the environment variables that are set that has the word Oracle, the grep command searches every line for that word. So now, here are my environment variable, my Oracle unique name, my Oracle seed, my Oracle base, my Oracle home has been properly defined. Next, if you do an ls, you will notice that we have multiple directories available to the Oracle user. However, at this stage, we need the installation disk for Oracle. So at this stage, we need to get the installation disk for Oracle. And it will be placed in Oracle Home. So let me change directory, Oracle underscore home. When I do a PWD, I am in Oracle Home. When I do an ls, nothing is installed in this Oracle Home. We need to go get the binary, the Oracle installation zip file. Now, normally you will download this from the Oracle website, but for the purpose of our training, we have kept it on the resources folder of the cloud server. Let me go to the resources folder of the cloud server, of the class server. So when you log in with your name and change directory to resources, here it is, Oracle 19C zip file. If I change directory to that directory, by the way, I logged in as the Oracle user to the cloud server. In your case, you will be logging in with your credentials. So there is the zip file that we need. So this server is running in California, but my Unix server is running locally in Atlanta. How do I get this file to my server? I can do a couple of things. I can use FileZilla. Let me quickly demonstrate that. FileZilla is an FTP client. On the left-hand side is this Windows computer. On the right-hand side, I can connect to that class server by providing the domain name, your username, password, port number 22, which is all stored right here. So these are some of the logins that I did the last time. So when I log in, it says authentication fails. Okay. Let me log in as this user. So suppose this was your user, so you go here and there will be the resources folder. So on the right hand side is the server in California. On the left hand side is my Windows computer in Atlanta. So I would go to 19C software. There we go. And this is what you want to download. So if I do a right-click download, it will download it to my Windows. Then I can then move it to my server using this same tool, FileZilla. Well, that's a very long way of doing it. I'm not going to use FileZilla. I'm going to do a direct copy using secure copy. I'm going to use a secure copy to copy it. So let me go to my Unix server. I'm already in the location that will be receiving the file, secure copy. Log in as my user, this will be your name, to this server. When you get there, go to this location. Let's do a PWD. I could just copy just this part. Go to this location, paste that. Go to the resources folder and go to this subfolder and copy this zip file right here. And now put a space there. I'm already in the location where I want the file. So I'm just going to put a dot right there. Dot meaning put it right here where I am. Of course, you will be asked the password for your user, and now the file transfer is taking place. I have used secure copy, and here's the syntax. Secure copy, this is where what I'm copying, the first part is what I'm copying, and the second part is where I am copying it to. Because I'm already inside that directory, I just put a dot there. Otherwise, I would have just done $Oracle home. Now, this is going to take a minute. So now we have the file has been FTP'd 100%. Let's take a look, ls-ltr. So there's the Linux, the Oracle installation zip file, and it's in our Oracle home PWD. So that's our Oracle home right there. And we are supposed to unzip it. Unzip it. Unzip that file. All right, once the zip file is unzipped, we now have a lot of directories here, and we are ready to now install Oracle. Well, I'm going to pause the video right here, and I will see you in the part 2 of this video. So in summary, what we have done in this part 1 is power on my Unix server, make sure that we made sure that the IP address is correct. We fixed that in the host file, and then we created the directory for Oracle home, and then we changed the ownership so that the Oracle user will be able to write to the directory. Then we FTP'd the Oracle installation file and unzipped it. We also set the environment variable for our Oracle installation. So we are ready to install the database, and we will do that in the next video. Thank you.